Welcome back to the Deep Dive. It is the week of February 16th, 2026, and I want to start by putting you in a very specific headspace. Imagine it's a Friday night, you own a mid-sized bistro, you're standing at the pass, you're watching the kitchen. It's chaotic, but, good chaos. The dining room is packed, the noise is perfect, plates are coming back clean. By every single visible metric, you're winning. But then the shift ends. The lights go down, you go back to the office, and you pull up the P&L for January, and you realize the math just isn't mathing.
It's the phantom menace of the hospitality industry right now. You're busy, but you're broke.
Exactly. And we're not talking about the price of Wagyu beef or the cost of a good sous chef. We are talking about the invisible overhead, the wires buzzing in the walls, the gas pipes under the floorboards. Why does simply keeping the lights on and the ovens hot suddenly feel like you're at a high-stakes poker table?
It really is a gamble at this point, and that's exactly what we are unpacking today. We have a fascinating stack of documents here. We're anchoring this whole deep dive on the 2026 Restaurant Energy Market Forecast and Procurement Strategy. It's the weekly recap from GWT2Energy. But to really get the why behind their numbers, we're also pulling in data from the U.S. Energy Information Administration, the EIA, the National Restaurant Association's 2026 Industry Report, and a very, very dense report from Goldman Sachs on inflation.
Okay, so the mission today is to connect some dots that don't usually get connected. We have global weather patterns, we have the energy situation in Europe, and then we have AI. And somehow, these three things are all colliding to squeeze restaurant margins to the absolute breaking point.
It sounds a little like a conspiracy theory when you say it like that.
It does. The robots and the weather are out to get me.
Yeah.
When I first read the brief, I thought, okay, surely artificial intelligence isn't the reason my burger costs $2 more.
Yeah.
That feels like a stretch, like we're just blaming the buzzword of the year.
Yeah. It's intuitive to blame the farmer or the landlord, Those are the costs you can see. But when you follow the electrons, you literally follow the power from the socket in your wall back to the source. The connection to AI is, it's undeniable. But before we even get to the robots, we have to look at the human cost. Because the baseline for restaurants in 2026 is, well, it's terrifying.
Let's start there, the state of the plate. You pulled a stat from the National Restaurant Association's report that actually made me stop and reread it.
I know exactly which one you mean, the profitability metric.
Right.
The report states that 42% of restaurant operators reported that they were not profitable last year.
42%. That's almost a coin flip. You walk into two restaurants, one is making money, the other is slowly bleeding out.
And that is up significantly from historical averages. You usually expect a certain churn in this business. It's tough. But this isn't about startups failing. This implies a systemic failure across the board. When nearly half the industry is operating in the red, it's not just bad management.
The report calls it a challenging economic environment, which feel like a really polite way of saying everything is expensive and customers are broke.
That's the heart of it. You've got a consumer base in 2026 that's incredibly cautious. So you can't just keep raising menu prices or people just stop showing up. But on the back end, your costs, your labor, your food costs, insurance, they're all sticky. They aren't going down.
And this is where energy enters the chat. Because I think in the past, utilities were sort of a fixed cost. You pay the rent, you pay the electric bill. It is what it is.
Right. It was just the cost of doing business. But the data shows a real shift. Over 90% of operators now cite energy costs as a key pressure point. When 9 out of 10 business owners agree on something, it's a crisis. In a low-margin business, and a good restaurant margin is maybe 5 to 8% on a good day, a 20% spike in your utility bill can just wipe out your net profit for the month.
It's the difference between being in that profitable 58% or the unprofitable 42%.
Precisely. It's the toggle switch for survival. If you mess this up, you're essentially working for free.
Okay, so let's look at the actual market. Because if I'm a restaurant owner looking at this week's GWT2 Energy recap, I might be confused. I look at the chart for natural gas, and it's down.
It is, yeah. If you look at the spot prices and the near-term futures, natural gas has dropped to its lowest level since October of 2025.
So crisis averted, gas is cheap, I can crank up the heat.
And this is the trap. This is what market analysts call a head fake.
A head fake, like in basketball.
Exactly. The market is looking one way, but it's about to go the other. The reason prices are down right now, this week, is purely because of the weather. We are looking at a forecast for warmer than average weather across almost the entire U.S.
Okay, Econ 101. Warmer weather in February means fewer furnaces running, less demand for heat, so the price drops.
Exactly. Natural gas is extremely weather sensitive in the short term, but, and this is the huge but, if you make your long-term budget decisions based on this week's weather, you're going to get crushed.
Because the weather changes, and we know it's getting weirder.
The weather changes, but the structural price has shifted. The EIA, the Energy Information Administration, they're forecasting that despite this warm week, the average natural gas price for all of 2026 will be around $4.31 per MMBtu.
Okay, for those of us who don't trade commodities, give me some context. Is 431 high?
It is significantly higher than what we saw in the early 2020s, which, often hovered around 250 or $3. We are talking about a 40 to 50% structural increase. That is a massive jump.
So even if it's 70 degrees in Chicago tomorrow, the gas is still expensive to buy for the long term.
Theoretically, the spot price drops for a day, but the contracts, future delivery, that is expensive.
Why? If we have so much gas in the U.S., I mean, we're the biggest producer in the world, right? Why doesn't the supply drive the price down?
Because the U.S. market isn't an island anymore. This is the part that frustrates a lot of people. We're connected to the global stage, specifically through LNG liquefied natural gas.
We're exporting it.
We are exporting massive amounts of it. The source notes that the need to replenish European gas storage ahead of next winter is driving a floor price under our gas.
Wow. So a restaurant in Ohio is competing for the same molecule of gas as a factory in Germany.
That is exactly right. Since the geopolitical shifts a few years ago, Europe relies heavily on American energy. So the price here isn't just set by demand in the U.S. anymore. It's set by how cold it is in Berlin or how full the storage tanks are in France.
That is a crucial piece of context. You can't just look at the thermometer outside your kitchen window to know what your bill's going to look like.
No, you almost have to check the weather in Paris. And the volatility is the real killer. If you're unhedged, just paying the market rate each month, you're exposed to global events you have zero control over. A cold snap in Poland can raise the price of a pizza in Pennsylvania.
Which brings us right back to that 42% unprofitability number. Volatility just kills planning.
It makes budgeting impossible. But gas is only half the kitchen. You've got the fryers and ovens, sure. But then you have the lights, the HVAC, the walk-in freezers, the POS systems.
Electricity.
The electricity. And this is where the story shifts from, geopolitics to something more like science fiction.
The AI tax.
The AI tax.
Both the GWT2Energy recap and the Goldman Sachs report draw this direct line between the burger on the plate and the data center down the road. Walk us through that.
Okay, so it feels invisible, but the cloud is actually just giant warehouses full of silicon chips that get incredibly hot. We are in the middle of a massive AI boom. Generative AI, large language models training these things requires an astronomical amount of computing power.
Give me a sense of scale. How much more power does an AI search use compared to, say, a regular Google search?
The estimates vary, but a query to a generative AI model can use 10 to 30 times more energy. Now multiply that by billions of queries a day.
Wow. So every time I ask a chatbot to write a poem about my cat, I'm basically burning a light bulb.
Basically. But it's not just the queries, it's the training of the models. These data centers run 247 at peak capacity. They're just hungry beasts, and they need two things: electricity to run the chips and electricity to run the massive cooling systems to keep those chips from melting.
So they're sucking power from the grid from both ends.
Correct. And the source material shows that this explosion of data centers is putting unprecedented pressure on the U.S. power grid.
So practically speaking, the restaurant down the street is competing for electrons with the server farm training the next chatbot.
That's a very accurate way to put it. The grid is a shared pool. It's like a bathtub. We used to have a steady flow in and out. Now you've just dropped a massive new pump into the tub, these gigawatt-scale data centers, and the water level drops for everyone else. Or, I guess more accurately, the price to keep the water flowing goes up.
The Goldman Sachs report specifically highlighted this link to food inflation, didn't it?
They did. They pointed out that rising electricity prices will be a direct contributor to inflation in food services. And think about the supply chain before the food even gets to the restaurant.
Cold storage.
Exactly. Giant refrigerated warehouses, food processing plants, those are all heavy energy users. If their electric bill goes up 20% because of AI demand, they pass that cost to the distributor who passes it to the restaurant.
And the restaurant passes it on to me.
Or if you refuse to pay $30 for a burger, the restaurant just eats the cost and joins that 42% unprofitable group.
That is wild. We usually hear about food inflation coming from, a drought in California or a bad harvest.
Yeah.
biological stuff, but now we're seeing inflation driven by algorithms.
It creates a new kind of volatility that doesn't follow the seasons. It follows the tech cycle.
Yeah.
And here's the kicker from the EIA forecast. They see a steady increase in commercial electricity consumption through 2026 and 2027. This is not a temporary spike. This is the new baseline.
I have to play devil's advocate, though. I mean, I see solar farms, I see wind turbines. We hear so much about green energy. Shouldn't all this new renewable capacity offset the demand from the robots?
Well, the fuel is free, but the infrastructure isn't. And the sources do acknowledge that, yes, the growth of solar and wind is helping. Without it, we would probably be in a blackout scenario. But, and this is the critical tension, the trend line for consumption is currently steeper than the trend line for new capacity.
We're plugging in new gadgets faster than we're building new power plants.
Think of it like a highway. I love this analogy because everyone understands traffic.
Okay, let's go with the highway.
So imagine a highway that's already prone to traffic jams at rush hour. That's our power grid. The city decides to add 2 new lanes. That's your solar and wind energy.
That should fix the traffic.
You'd think so. But what if, at the exact same moment those lanes open, a fleet of 1 million heavy-duty trucks, let's call them the AI fleet, suddenly merges onto that highway?
Oh, so the traffic doesn't get better.
Yeah, it might even get worse. And in this analogy, the traffic is the price of electricity. It's congestion pricing. The demand is so robust that even with new green energy, the underlying trend points toward higher costs.
And there's another layer to that. Solar only works when the sun shines. Data centers run 24/7.
Right, that's the base load issue. Restaurants need power at 7 p.m. for dinner service. If the sun went down at 6, solar doesn't help unless you have massive batteries, which are also expensive. So you fall back on natural gas plants, which brings us right back to the high price of gas we talked about earlier.
It's a vicious cycle, like being stuck in a revolving door that keeps spinning faster.
It's a tightly coupled feedback loop. The AI needs power, the power needs gas, the gas is being exported, and the restaurant owner is left holding the bill.
So let's just recap this for a second. We have restaurants operating on razor-thin margins, almost half losing money. We have natural gas prices that are deceptively low this week, but are structurally high because of global exports. And we have an AI boom that is just gobbling up electricity and driving up rates for the foreseeable future.
It paints a very tough picture for the independent operator.
It does. It makes me wonder, are these restaurant operators just helpless victims here? Do they just have to sit there and pay whatever the utility says they owe?
If they do that, they probably won't be in business in 2027. That's really the conclusion here. If you're in that 42%, you cannot afford to be passive.
So what's the active move? How do you fight back?
This is where the procurement strategy part of the GWT2Energy report comes in. They argue you don't have to be a victim, specifically if you are in a deregulated market.
Deregulated market. Okay, let's just make sure everyone's on the same page. Now, that means a state where you can choose who you buy your energy from, right?
Yeah.
You aren't stuck with just a local monopoly.
Correct. States like Texas, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Illinois, New York. In these states, the utility still owns the wires and delivers the power, but you can buy the actual electricity or gas from a third-party supplier.
Okay, so how does that help? Doesn't everyone just charge the market rate anyway?
Not exactly. The strategy GWT2 Energy proposes is using technology to fight technology. They advocate for something called reverse auction bid software.
Reverse auction. I know what a normal auction is. We yell out higher and higher prices.
All right, a reverse auction flips that on its head. In this case, the restaurant is the prize. The restaurant says, I'm a reliable business, I use X amount of power, and I need a contract for the next 24 months.
Okay. Who wants my money?
Exactly. Then, instead of you calling 3 suppliers and begging for a quote, the suppliers enter a digital bidding arena. They see your profile and they compete to offer the lowest rate to win your business.
So instead of the price going up, the competition forces the price down.
It squeezes the margin out of the supplier's side. It creates total transparency. In a traditional negotiation, the supplier knows the market, but you don't. In a reverse auction, they have to beat each other in real time.
That seems like a no-brainer. But the report mentions something else. It's not just about getting the rock-bottom price. It's about budget certainty.
And this is arguably more important. Budget certainty is the antidote to all the volatility we just talked about.
Go deeper on that. Why is knowing the price more important than the price being just a tiny bit lower?
Imagine you're that owner. If you stay on a variable rate, you might pay $2,000 in January and $6,000 in February because of a cold snap. How do you manage cash flow with that kind of variance.
You can't. You'd have to hoard cash just in case. You can't hire, you can't buy new equipment.
Exactly. But if you use an auction to lock in a fixed rate for 24 or 36 months, you know exactly what your bill will be. Even if AI data centers double their consumption next year, your rate is locked. You're shielded.
You've built a firewall around your P&L.
You've removed the gambling element from your overhead. In a tight margin industry, as the report calls it, removing that variable is a crucial competitive advantage. It allows you to invest in other things because you aren't hoarding cash for a surprise utility bill.
It's moving from being a passive payer to being a proactive manager.
Precisely. And in 2026, energy management isn't just for factory foremen. It is a required skill for a restaurateur. You cannot cook the food if you cannot afford the fire.
That is a really powerful way to frame it. The days of just yell at the prep cook to close the freezer door are over. You need a financial strategy.
You do. The close the freezer door stuff is efficiency. That's still important. But procurement, how you buy the energy, that's where the real leverage is. When you have global forces like LNG exports and paradigm shifts like the AI boom affecting your bottom line, you need sophisticated tools to fight back.
And for those listeners who aren't in a deregulated market, say in the Southeast or parts of the West,
They have a harder road. They can't choose their supplier. For them, the focus has to be entirely on efficiency, smarter equipment, LED retrofits, demand response programs. They have to reduce the amount they use because they can't control the price they pay.
So what does this all mean for the listener? We've traveled from the dinner rush to the gas fields of Texas, over to Silicon Valley and back to the manager's office.
I think the key takeaway is that everything is connected. We think of industries in silos: tech is tech, food is food, energy is energy. But the 2026 landscape shows that the success of a local bistro is tied to the weather in Paris and the processing power of a chatbot.
It's a small, expensive, interconnected world.
It is. And for anyone listening, the lesson is that volatility is the new normal. The head fake of cheap gas this week is the perfect example. If you only look at what's happening today, you will be unprepared for tomorrow. You have to look at the structural trends.
And those structural trends are pointing up.
They are. Demand is increasing, geopolitical tension is high, the grid is strained.
So you have to use the tools available, like that reverse auction, to claw back some control.
Control is the key word. You can't control the weather, you can't stop the AI revolution, but you can control the contract you sign.
Well said. This has been a really eye-opening look at the invisible costs of your dinner. We started with unprofitable restaurants. We looked at how warm weather masks, high gas prices, realized AI is eating up the power grid, and finished with a strategy to bid for better rates.
It really highlights how complex the modern business environment has become. You have to be a bit of a meteorologist, a tech analyst, and a commodities trader just to sell a sandwich.
It certainly does. And I want to leave you with a thought today that's been nagging at me since we started this. We know AI is being sold to restaurants as a savior. It helps write menus, schedule staff, predict inventory. It's supposed to make things more efficient.
That is the promise of the technology, yes. Optimize everything.
But if the energy cost of running that AI is making the food itself more expensive and making the overhead higher, at what point does the technology start eating the profits it was supposed to generate?
That is the multi-billion-dollar question.
Are we reaching a point where the tool becomes too expensive to use? Not because of the software license, but because of the electricity bill. Something to think about next time you order a burger. Thanks for listening to this deep dive, and we will catch you on the next one.